Hello, everybody, and welcome to the next entry in the diary of the Andy Warhol Diaries. This is your pal Mubbo. Today we're going to be looking at Tuesday, December 14th, 1976, on this rainy Easter Sunday. Before we do, we have some housekeeping to do really quick. First, I'd like to put out a PFA for the murder of my Uncle Charles Pancheri in his home in Elizabeth, New Jersey. The case is a cold case, but if you have any information regarding the person or persons that may be responsible for his murder, you can call the Crime Stoppers tip line at 908-654-TIPS. That's 908-654-8477. Or you can go to their website at www.uctip.org, www.unioncountytip.org. Thank you for any information. Also, if you want to read along with the diary entries, I'm doing the video or afterwards or beforehand to prep yourself. You can go to this website right here. This is a digital copy of the diary. You just go to this main page and then you click right down here that says full text. And today we're looking at Tuesday, December 14th, 1976. On this day, Andy received a letter from his editor of Popism in the afternoon. That would be the editor, Steve Aronson, right here, this guy in the fancy glasses. He says he's leaving the publishing house of Harcourt, Brace, and Jovanovich. Now, Steve has written he's written for many publications like Vanity Fair, Vogue, and Esquire magazines. Harcourt, Brace, Jovanovich was a publishing house that was acquired by Houghton Mifflin in 2007. The publishing house was located in New York City from 1919 to 1982. It also had a few non-publishing businesses like insurance and business consulting, as well as owning several theme parks like SeaWorld. It was purchased in 1976 for $46 million. Steve told Andy that he'd asked Mr. Jovanovich, who's this guy right here, to take over on the Popism project. That would be William Jovanovich. And William grew up in Colorado. He joined the Navy and then went to college at Columbia University. He took the job at Harcourt Brace as a college textbook salesman and was promoted quickly through the company. Oops, wrong screen. Sorry, guys. At 34 years old, he became the company's president only after 7 years of being at the company and starting out at $50 a week. When William retired, the publishing house had almost 12,000 employees and the annual sales were more than $1.4 billion. So William was now put in charge of Andy's Popism book. It was published in 1980 to coincide with the 2006 film Factory Girl. Harcourt issued a new edition of the book. One review of the book noted it's gossipy and alive and one of the best things you'll ever read about those 8 crazy years. Popism is written in a first-person memoir style and chronicles Warhol's life and the culture around the factory studio in the 1960s. So you can see a couple of different book covers that they have here. And would I read it? I think I have read it, but you know what? For $1.30, I think it's worth reading if you want to pick that up. Just 1 minute. My eye is itching me like crazy. Back in the diary, Andy gets taken out to lunch to the old favorite place, La Grenouille, by Walter Stait from Philadelphia. Walter was an Institute of Contemporary Art board member and longtime friend of Andy's. I could not find a picture of him, and I started wasting like way too much time like looking for a picture of this guy. I don't think it's all that important. The ICA has a reputation for showing art of emerging creators who show great promise, and they held the first museum show exhibiting Andy's work. It does not have a permanent collection, but new artists are featured 3 times a year. So here's the building right here, the ICA. Walter told Maxime and Loulou de la Falaise to meet them at the restaurants. Now, here's Maxime. We talked about her in a prior video. She was a minor code breaker during World War II, but was let go when she developed kleptomania. Loulou, right here, was the sister of Maxime, and she was a jewelry designer associated with Yves Saint Laurent. Her jewelry is notable for their large stones and crystals. Some people would call these statement pieces. They're just, for me, they're a bit much, but I think with the right outfits, they would look really nice, but they're just not for me. Cheaper versions of her jewelry were sold through Home Shopping Network. And incidentally, Loulou's full name is Louise Vava Lucia Henriette Le Ballet de la Falaise, which reminds me a lot of Loulou, her big long name. Back in the diary, Andy spots a much slimmer Truman Capote across the room. Truman Capote, of course, born in Louisiana in 1924, was a novelist, screenwriter, playwright, and actor whose books include Breakfast at Tiffany's, which was the basis for the movie of the same name, giving Audrey Hepburn her most well-known role as Holly Golightly. He was also known for the book In Cold Blood, in which he told the tale of the murders of the Clutter family in Kansas in 1979. A movie was released in 1967 under the same name, starring everyone's favorite accused murderer, Robert Blake, second to only O.J. Simpson. Another interpretation of the book was released in 2005, starring the fantastic Philip Seymour Hoffman under the name Capote. Now, Truman's most controversial book, which put him on the shit list of many influential people who thought they were talking to Truman in confidence, is an unfinished book from 1954 called Answered Prayers, which I actually own, but I haven't read it yet. I can't wait to read this. This is the problem with doing these videos, because as I start to deep dive, I'm like, oh, I got to get that book. Oh, I need to read this. And my book pile just gets bigger and bigger, as you will see as I share that with you. The published version of what was finished was shown in Esquire magazine in 1975, and you can get this book on Amazon. And here's a very interesting article right here in the New York Post about the book itself. Basically, he spilled a lot of tea and discussed the secrets and scandals of the hoi polloi and the hoity-toity and the fancy pants people he associated with. The book caused him to be cast out of many inner circles, and he was only let back in after a period of time had passed. And I can't imagine those same people speaking freely to Truman Capote again. They have to be like completely on their guard, as is with most writers and screenplay writers and things like that. They are going to be influenced by the people that are around them. Truman was also a fixture at Studio 54, even though he was openly gay. He was surrounded by beautiful women whom he called his swans, which is much better than the Halstenettes, and I will go to my grave saying that. The Halstenettes are a stupid name. I'm going to get that engraved on my tombstone. I'm going to get one of those little machines that you can record a message, and as you walk past, it's going to be like, thanks for visiting today. By the way, the Halstenettes are a stupid name. Back in the diary, Andy is impressed with Truman's weight loss and remarks that Truman looks like he did when Andy first met him. Andy first thought he was being slighted when Truman didn't say hello back to Andy, but later on in the lunch, Truman put on his glasses and he waved to Andy. Andy also received Truman's personal phone number. Andy also admired all the chic girls wearing Yves Saint Laurent fur hats. And you just need to blow my nose for a second. Hold on. Thank you. After the lunch, Andy worked in his office all afternoon. Francois de Menil took Andy to Norman Mailer's townhouse in Brooklyn Heights. Francois de Menil was an award-winning architect and interior designer and comes from a wealthy family that acquired their fortune through their holdings in Schlumberger, a multinational oil field service company. And apparently he's still kicking around. This is his LinkedIn profile. Their money enabled his family to build a large collection of art, and the Menil collection houses more than 25,000 objects acquired by Francois's parents and his siblings. Andy and Francois headed over to Norman Mailer's place. Here's the Menil collection. This is just some of the photos if you want to visit. It's located in Houston, Texas. And this is pretty interesting. You can get like a walkthrough if you're looking for something in particular. Norman was an American writer. All right, so we're going back to Norman Mailer. Norman Mailer was an American writer, journalist, and filmmaker. He was born in Long Branch, New Jersey, and raised in Flatbush, and later in Crown Heights. He attended Harvard at 16 years old. Norman majored in engineering, but took writing courses as electives. Norman tried to get a deferment from serving in World War II by stating he was writing an important literary work that pertained to the war. His request was denied and he entered the Army. Norman stated his time in the Army was the worst experience in his life and also the most important. The letters he wrote to his wife, Bea, became the foundation of his book, The Naked and the Dead. This book became Mailer's only book to reach the #1 position and was a New York Times bestseller for 62 weeks. This book was also included in the list of 100 best English novels of the 20th century, and it has never officially gone out of print. In the 1960s, Mailer was committed to Bellevue Hospital for 17 days for stabbing his second wife, Adele, with a knife he used to clean his nails. He said he did this in an attempt to relieve her of her cancer. Initially, he told people not to help her and told guests at the party to get away from her and let the bitch die. Mailer eventually came to terms with his actions, which he called cowardly, lousy, and dirty. Mailer received a suspended sentence and 3 years probation. In 1997, Adele wrote a book called The Last Party that recounts the stabbing and the aftermath. Now, of course, with a review like this that was written, I have to read this book. So I went to Amazon and they had one copy available and it was by a third-party seller and he wanted like $80 for it. And whenever I see that, I kind of think that this is a scam. So don't go to Amazon if you want this book. I actually found it on a bookseller website called Abe Books, ABE, like Abe Lincoln. And it turns out that Abe Books is a subsidiary of Amazon, so they are reputable sellers. You can still find some scams on there, but I was able to find the book for $17. I think it came from Thrift Books out of Houston, which is a very reputable bookseller. Just make sure that you do your research before you pick up anything. Don't give people your money. So back at the townhouse, I want to go over my book list for you. So I have the book right here. It's The Last Party. I just got it. Hopefully you guys can see this. It's kind of dark in this room, but here you go. I just got it. I want to show you my shameful to-read list. So these are some of the books that I have to read. This is, I think, The Last Party makes book number 28. I'm good for about 14 books a year. I think since last summer I've read 14. So this is about 2 years of books, and there you can see Truman Capote's Answered Prayers waiting to be read. If you're a bibliophile like me, maybe you'll appreciate this because every time I read something interesting about a book, I have to pick it up. So we're going to go back to the townhouse now. Norman Mailer's townhouse. Andy states that Norman used to live in the whole house, but now he only lives on the top floors and he rents the bottom out. Andy notes that Norman had the front part of the house all glass looking out over Manhattan and how beautiful it is. And these are some pictures from this Town and Country article right here. You can read about it. So Norman actually had his apartment made to look like the interior of a ship, which I think is pretty cool. It's a really nice place. It's got an atrium on the top floor, and this is the view of the atrium if you're standing on the roof and the beautiful views of New York City. This is the inside. So if you got an extra, $3 million, $4 million, you can pick this up. And if you go on Zestimate, you can see all the pictures. It's only 2 bedrooms, though. Norman also installed hammocks in some of the corners so that you really felt like you were on a ship. I was reading that. And here's the views. This building doesn't look all that great. And I mean, I know it must be like wintertime because the trees are bare, but yeah, like the building might be nice, but apparently, like, the neighborhood is okay. It's not the greatest, but this is kind of expensive for like a neighborhood that's just okay. Back in the diary, Andy commented this party was full of wall-to-wall intellectuals, just like in the 60s. Arthur Schlesinger was at this gathering. Arthur was an American historian, social critic, and public intellectual. Arthur was from Columbus, Ohio, and he attended Harvard. He then went on to become speechwriters for both Adlai Stevenson and special assistant and court historian to President Kennedy. He wrote the Pulitzer Prize-winning book about the Kennedy administration called 1,000 Days of JFK in the White House. Another person was spotted by Andy was Mica, and her husband Ahmet Ertegun. We spoke about them in a prior video. They were interior designers and well-known philanthropists. Andy also mentions a person who wrote a book about LBJ, and it's a bit confusing if he's talking about Mica or somebody else. I couldn't find any book written by Mica about LBJ, and Andy didn't give the person's name. So I'm thinking maybe it was redacted, like just part of the sentence was redacted and not the whole thing. But I couldn't find anything written by Mica about LBJ. Andy also... Andy notes that Norman Mailer looks good. He had white hair and he looked Irish. Norman's mother was also at this gathering. Andy describes her as little. Norman's mother, Fanny, died in 1985 of a heart ailment at the age of 87. She operated a personnel placement business, mostly for housekeeping, until she retired in the late 1960s. So here you can see Fanny right here and her two older sisters. So this is Norman Mailer's mother right there. Jean Kennedy Smith, who was JFK's sister, and her husband were also at the gathering. Jean's husband being Stephen Edward Smith. Stephen was a financial analyst and political strategist for the Kennedy administration. Andy states that one of the party guests, Sandra Hochman, told Andy that he's a chapter in her upcoming book and told Andy that she had a picture of him on her mantle, but Andy didn't think she was telling the truth. She just talked to Andy about feminism and junk like that, quote unquote. Sandra is an American poet, author, screenwriter, lyricist, and documentary filmmaker. Her first autobiographical novel, Walking Papers, was well received in some circles and in some opinions is considered a masterpiece. Isabella Rossellini was also at the Mailer gathering. We talked about Isabella before. She's an actress and the daughter of Ingrid Bergman, who famously starred in Casablanca with Humphrey Bogart. Andy says that Isabella at this time, she was working for Italian television and she's doing a thing on boxers. Not this kind, I found out. She's working with Puerto Rican boxer Jose Torres. Now, AI says that there's no evidence of Isabella and Jose working together in 1976. So maybe it was a project that got started but not finished, but I couldn't find anything of this pairing. Isabella told Andy that she ran over to the Pierre Hotel when she saw her mother, Ingrid, talking to him, but Andy already left. Now, we talked about the Pierre in the last video, I believe, where I mentioned that an episode of MASH used the Pierre as the location for a party for family members of the MASH unit to kick up their heels. Isabella supposedly couldn't find her coat when she was leaving the party, so she just left without it. Andy observed that Norman and Francois, the architect who brought Andy to the party, remember him? They must be close friends, as they hugged and kissed and they punched each other a lot. Francois drove Andy home in his Mercedes, and Andy said he was a good driver. And that's going to be it for this diary entry. Now we're going to do this day in history. Today in history, Tuesday, December 14th, 1976, the West Point cadets who left because of a recent cheating scandal are urged to be readmitted in a speedy process by a special commission headed by former astronaut Frank Borman. West Point is a military college located in New York, and in 1976, over 150 cadets were accused of cheating on a take-home electrical exam by collaborating on the exam together. Dozens of cadets were initially expelled or resigned, with 61 found guilty. Also on this date, a study for the National Academy of Sciences National Research Council has found that the chance of death or severe complications for a patient undergoing an operation vary greatly. Sometimes the risk of death was as much as 2.5 times greater at one hospital versus another. The study found that the quality of nursing staff, the amount of hospital spends per patient, and the doctor's restriction or granting of staff privileges were among the most hospital-related factors. Don't go to this doctor. And that's going to do it for this diary entry. And as we do, we end on the question screen like every good PowerPoint presentation. I'd like to thank you for watching, and I appreciate every like, every view, everything. And thank you very much. And I can't figure out how to end the presentation. Have a great day, everybody. Have a wonderful Easter, and I'll talk to you in the next one. MUBBO.